Thank you, Corinne Sensei, my dear Dharma sister. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to this center for opening their home and making us feel welcome here. I'm not sure if anyone from this group there is here, but I think not. But I want it to be known that we are grateful for their welcome. And thank you to the Sangha, GenjoAn, who helped organize this and invited me, and to all of you for coming. Am I speaking loud enough? Louder? Okay. And is the fan bothering the noise? Because we can turn that off and that might help. I don't know. We'll just have to live with the heat. We make do with what we have. You know, that's probably better. Yeah, okay. I will try to speak clearly, slow enough so that I realize English is not your first language and it's not easy listening to a foreign talk like this. So I will, if I'm speaking too quickly or you don't understand something, don't hesitate to ask. Sensei can translate or I can repeat whatever it is. So you know the subject of the talk tonight, already home, already there, the Zen art of coming home. I would like to begin by telling you a story. This is a story that happened about this time last year. A beautiful late spring, early summer morning in Paris. And I worked until the end of March, just recently, in a center in Paris that was receiving refugees. We all know about this refugee crisis in Europe. And this was a center where the refugees came and they could live for 5 to 10 days while their papers were being processed, and it meant that they didn't have to live in the street. And they had a bed, they had meals, there were other activities proposed for them, they had showers. It was a home for that time. And I worked there for a year and a half, from the opening of the center until it closed at the end of March. And the director asked me last summer if I would offer meditation to the refugees. And at first I hesitated for about 5 minutes until I thought, yes, this is something I can offer. This is something I can do. Usually, most of the time, I was doing their laundry, I was talking with them, I was helping serve food, I was welcoming them, showing them around, various things. But this was something that I had that was dear to me that I could really share with them. So I agreed to do it, and I would, on this day in particular, I gathered them together. There were about 10 young men, none over 30, so I'm like twice their age, a woman, and we dragged our chairs into a corner of this center. It's a big warehouse that was empty, falling into ruins, that the city of Paris allowed us to use for this refugee center. So we took our chairs into this far corner, put them in a circle, and we had no common language. Some of them spoke a little English, some of them spoke a little French, some of them spoke a little Arabic, although I don't speak Arabic. And we had I don't know what countries they came from, but we were all from somewhere else. Myself, I immigrated to France from the United States many, many years ago. So we were all from abroad, as we say. We were all migrants. And I said that to them. As best we could translate, someone would translate from English, someone from French. There were some who didn't speak any of those languages. It was kind of a mishmash, as we say. So I suddenly forgot everything I knew about teaching meditation, although I've been doing this for 25 years almost. No, teaching for 18 years, right? I forgot suddenly everything I knew about teaching meditation. And I had to just stay with the basics. No words. So I showed them how to sit on the chairs with their feet on the ground, hands on their knees, back straight. I was doing the motions, showing them to look down, to keep the eyes open. And then I said, okay, how am I going to do this? And I showed them breathing. And I tried to indicate, just follow your breath. Just be aware of your breath. Pay attention to your breath. Look down on this dirty floor with cigarette butts and whatever. Hands here, feet on the ground, and that's it. Okay, everyone did it. And I had a little bell. I rang it. And we started for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I showed them how to do a very basic walking meditation that we did around our circle of chairs. We sat back down, and we did 10 more minutes. Meanwhile, there's all the busy traffic of Paris outside, voices of people in the street, people who in the center walking past, looking at us, like, what are they doing? And we just sat there. We just sat there. And after the second 10 minutes, I looked up, they looked up, and most of the faces were, we say in English, beaming, brilliant, shining. And one man in particular had a huge smile on his face. It was contagious almost. You just wanted to smile when you looked at him. And at that moment, I suddenly realized what had been happening for us, what had happened, at least for him and for me, and I'm assuming for some of the others. We were home. We were just here at that moment, before all of the nationalities, the borders, the languages, the countries, the ages, the sex, the races. We were just here for those 10 minutes. And I could see, felt that. And he said to me, he could speak French, more or less. He must have been from French-speaking Africa, because he spoke okay French. And he said to me, that was such a good idea. We should do that more. And I knew that I probably would never see that man again, because he would be there 5 days. I would probably never, ever see him again. And I said, you can. You can do this wherever you are, whether you're in the street, whether you're wandering across the Alps to get to France, wherever you are, you can do this. I tried to say that so that they all could understand that. I don't know if they did, but I think he did. I definitely did. And it changed, I'm not going to say it changed my life, but it changed something about my practice and the meaning of this practice and what it means to sit. Because we just spend a lot of time just sitting in the Zen practice. Some of you maybe are familiar with Zen, others maybe not. It doesn't matter. I think from that story you hear what the Zen practice is about. And from that moment is when I really started thinking about this home. What does that mean, home? And the whole reason I began working with the refugees was because for me, it was a koan. In the Zen tradition, we have what we call koans. They are these stories that don't make any sense. That it's an enigma. Logically, you can't figure it out. The famous one, what is the sound of one hand clapping? It makes no sense. Or what was your original face before your parents were born? Makes no sense. And you cannot resolve, I say that with quotes, something like that with your thinking mind. It has to be experiential. And the refugee crisis, the streets of Paris full of refugees, and not only Paris, people dying crossing the Mediterranean. We all know all the stories, right? It didn't make any sense to me. It was a koan. How can it be that millions and millions of people are leaving their homes, their families, everything they have ever known and loved in these extremely difficult circumstances? And when they arrive somewhere else where they are hoping to find home, people say to them, no, we don't want you here. We don't care what you're living, what our role is in what you're living. No. Not everyone says no. But the fact that this was happening was a koan for me. The way that because of my long practice of koan study, I know that you resolve it by sitting with it, going into it, experiencing it. So I went toward them. I went to meet them. I talked with them as best we could. I learned so much about these people and where they were coming from and what their hopes were and what their dreams were. And they were no different than me, actually. And my son, who is 22 now, started coming with me. And he looked just like them. They were about his age. They dressed the same way. They all had a cell phone. They had nothing else. They had the clothes on their back and a cell phone, basically. And they talked like him. They looked like him. They were interested in the football matches. They were interested in the same music. Everything was the same. They wanted a peaceful, full, rich life, just like the rest of us. And I discovered then, and this morning I'm telling you about, that when we drop all of our views, our positions, our judgments, everything we know, and just sit and settle, our hearts open, and we welcome all that is. There's no more distinguishing between what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. And this is something that happens moment to moment. It's an experience every single one of you has had or can have. And I say this from experience. It's, as we say in French, à la portée de. It's within everyone's capacity. And this is what I call, the Zen art of coming home. We come home moment to moment, every moment. It's possible. And we realize that we were always here. We weren't anywhere else. Where else could we be but here? I was once at a conference with a Zen teacher in our lineage, Bernie Glassman, someone in the audience asked a question. I often don't feel like I'm present. What can I do? And Bernie said, that's a really good question. So let's start by saying, everyone who is not present here tonight, please raise your hand. And people raised their hands. Some people raised their hands. Other people laughed. But this, and Bernie was very insistent upon the fact that it wasn't funny. This was a real experience we have of not feeling present. At the same time, it was a way of showing that we're always here even when we don't think we are, we don't know we are. And this is the drama of our lives. We think we are not home, and yet we are always home, we just don't realize it. In Zen, so I come back to the Zen art aspect of this, we say we take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, which are the three treasures. We call them the three treasures. It's just three aspects of our life that we're taking refuge in, three different aspects. And when we say taking refuge, we are looking at that as a sanctuary, as a place where we can find ourselves, and we're actually engaging on a path that will bring us home, bring us to an awakening to who we truly are, because that's what home is, where we are truly ourselves. We say in English, make yourself at home when we're visiting someone. Or in French we say, fais comme chez toi. And maybe in German you have some sort of expression like this. You do? Right. And that is a way of, when you welcome people into your home, it's making them feel that this is their home. They're accepted. They're welcome. They can be at ease and relax. And on the Zen path, we're doing that too. We're saying, sit down, settle, and see what happens. And moment to moment, we let go of these ideas we have, all of these things that we reject or these things that we grasp, the differences and the separations that we create between me and you. Our refugee crisis is a manifestation clearly of that. There is I and other, and there's a big difference, and we're rejecting the other. We do that within ourselves too, because there are things within ourselves we don't like, and we reject them. We push them away, we want to get rid of them, we want to change them, and yet, through this just sitting, we say it's the practice of Zen meditation is called just sitting. Things come and they go, and we don't intervene. We let them be. Exactly what these men experienced at the Zen Center. At the Zen Center. It was a Zen Center, actually, Because what's a Zen Center? As soon as we start saying this is a Zen Center and that's not, then we're creating a separation. Of course, there are Zen centers and there are refugee centers. But it's an interesting lapsus that I made because it's true, depending on how we approach it. So we can look at it from the literal view, which is Zen center, refugee center. Cafe, bookstore. German, French. Afghanistan, Russia. We make all those differences, and that's from a literal point of view, it's true. We get into trouble when we only see those differences, though. When we focus only on the differences. From what we could say from the completely opposite point of view, there are no countries, there are no sexes, there are no races, there are no walls. Zen center, refugee center, cafe, restaurant, bookstore, gas station, all one. No separations. If we fix on that, if we focus only on that, we'll have problems. Because then we don't respect the differences. And we behave the same way in a library as in a discotheque. And that's not appropriate. Or we behave the same way in a Zen center as in a sports club. It's not appropriate. So what do? It's not one, it's not the other. So as the Buddha pointed out, there is the middle way, which is actually not the middle, but it's a phrase that we use. It's not actually between. It's actually the two together. From that point of view, it depends. Instead of just black and white or no colors, there are gray areas. There are subtleties, there are nuances. It depends on the moment, the place, the time. When I sat down with those refugees, that was a Zen center. When we put the chairs away in the dining room, it was the dining room. When we went downstairs and did the laundry, it was the laundry room. At the same time, it was all the Zen center as well. But we acknowledge the differences, at the same time, not focusing on that, and not, because we don't focus on it, we are not stuck. It can only be this. If you're from Afghanistan, you can only live in Afghanistan. It doesn't matter if there is war, terror, doesn't matter, you have to stay in Afghanistan. It also doesn't mean, come on, everybody come. No problem, no papers, no status, no borders. It doesn't mean that either. We have to respect both. Home in that then, how does home tie into this? So most of you, I'm assuming, are not homeless. Homeless. You have an apartment where you live, you have a room where you live, you have a house where you live, and that's your home. And you have a city that you come from, or a village, and that's your hometown, as we say. There's a place that is your home. Now, what if you have to leave that place, and maybe you have? You've moved to another city for work, or study, or followed someone you love, or just because you wanted a bigger or smaller place, whatever. Then you make a new home. You start over and you make a new home. Sometimes that's not so easy. Myself, when I followed my Zen teacher to live in the community she was creating in a suburb of Paris, I left the beautiful apartment I was living in. I was a single mother at the time with my small daughter. And I was living in this neighborhood in Paris that I had always dreamed about. Le Marais, for any of you who know Paris. And I had this fabulous apartment, great home. I had made this home for my daughter and I when my marriage broke up, and I loved it. But I really wanted to go live with my teacher and deepen the practice and help her create this center. So we went, my daughter, myself, my new partner at the time, and I was pregnant with another child. The thing was, I had to leave Paris and move to the suburb, which is across the frontier that circles Paris, the périphérique. And anything on the other side of that, not good. In the eyes of Parisians. Paris is the ultimate. Why would you want to live anywhere else but Paris? I had to do it because I wanted to. I wanted to be with my teacher. I had to do it. It was really difficult, very, very hard. We moved. Here I am in this suburb that was not very nice. The cafes were not nice at all. Today it's completely transformed. This was almost 25 years ago, and it's completely transformed. It's kind of like this neighborhood, actually, here. And so here we were. And I was just devastated, having left everything. And my daughter had to go to this school that wasn't very nice. And her school in the Marais had been this 18th or 17th century hôtel particulier that was just fabulously renovated. And here she was in kind of this grungy, post-war rundown school. The suburb was a communist suburb, and so the town hall was Stalinist architecture, and it was just not very nice. I hated it. I really was just heartbroken that I had to leave this neighborhood and live there. And then, a few months later, there was a huge general strike in Paris. Famous strikes. No metro, no buses, for weeks on end. And I was really pregnant. For some reason, we had to go into the city, to take my daughter to her father's house. And there was no choice. We were in a traffic jam, and we had to turn down a road that went into the neighborhood where I had lived. And until then, I had avoided going back to that neighborhood because I would feel that it was my home and I would just be devastated. So we turned down this road near the Place des Vosges, and that's where my daughter had played as a small girl. And I thought, oh, this is going to be devastating. I can't even look. But I did look. It was beautiful. I loved it. I was happy. It was okay. We drove on and throughout the neighborhood. We didn't actually go in my street because we couldn't, but we went on. And then we came to another neighborhood. And I felt the same way about that neighborhood. And then another neighborhood. Same. I have always loved Paris, but this was like every neighborhood in Paris was my home. I loved it like my home. And the only way I realized, the only way that I had been able to experience that was by letting go. Letting go of the one place I could call home. Then I could appreciate everywhere, and I could be home just where I was at that moment. Of course, again, this is an absolute point of view that I was experiencing from a relative perspective because I was going into these different neighborhoods and appreciating it. That's the Zen art of coming home. We sometimes say it's dwelling in non-dwelling. So, I don't know how could you translate that in German, Corinne? Dwelling in non-dwelling?
Yes, I translate.
For everyone else, I don't know if...
Verweilen in nicht verweilen. I'm teaching
and,
German too.
And is what? What?
I'm teaching that word in German too. That's why I know the translation.
Okay, good. Good. So is dwelling a word in German that can also mean a place, a house, or a...
No, that cannot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because in English, a dwelling is somewhere where you live. It's kind of an old term that isn't used so common for that, but it is. My dwelling is this, or I have a dwelling, you know. And so now we're saying it's dwelling in non-dwelling, which means being at home in something that is not stable. Being at home in not being fixed. Because the truth of the matter is, the reality is, nothing is fixed. Everything is moving, is impermanent, changing all the time. That's the bad news, right? But it's also the good news. Because the good news, in the sense that the bad news, because suddenly you feel groundless. The rug is being pulled out. There is no rug. The ground is moving all the time. At the same time, the good news is that means you don't have anywhere to be fixed. And therefore you can be who you are, home, wherever you are. It sounds like it's coming from here, but you can have that experience. And when you truly experience it, well then, you understand we have this expression in English, home is where the heart is. Some of these old expressions are really true. We don't even think about it, but they really are true, because when you do this sitting here, not attaching to things, letting things come and go, your heart opens, and you find out what is true in your heart. You find out who you truly are. And that's home. You don't have to go somewhere else. In fact, the good news and the bad news, there is nowhere else to go, and there is no one else to be. So, sorry, bad news is you're not going to become someone else. And there's nowhere else where you can go that is going to be better than this. The good news is terrific. You don't have to go anywhere else. You don't have to be anyone else. You are already it. My Dharma name, my teacher gave me the Dharma name. When we take these vows, the refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, our teacher gives us a name. And my teacher gave me the name Tu es cela, which is French for you are that, or it's also an old Advaita term, ancient India Sanskrit, if I pronounce it correctly, Tatsam Sati or something like that. Does that ring a bell for you? Yeah. Because all of these wisdom traditions are pointing to the same thing. You are the treasure you're looking for. You are it. You are home. The home you're looking for is right where you are. For these refugees, you know, it's not so easy to say that, right? But I felt that if I could just give them a different experience of themselves, give them the opportunity to have a different experience of themselves and the situation, it can relieve some of the suffering that they're experiencing. And I think for those 10 minutes, for some of them, it did. I don't know if they took it on with them, wherever they went. What also was extraordinary with them was, I do introductions to meditation for all kinds of people. Children, adults, people in Zen centers, people in different situations. And I would say that group of 10 people, or generally the groups that I did there at the refugee center, were much more, I'm not sure if settled is the word, but it seemed like they were much less restless than most of the people who I teach, who are professionals, you know, busy with their life, parents, or little children, whatever. Those men, it was really interesting for me to see that. They seemed to much more easily just sit and settle than many other people. Could also be cultural. Maybe in their cultures they're more familiar with that kind of thing. I don't know. partly cultural, partly their situation, of finally they could just sit there and no one expected anything from them. No one was asking for papers. They didn't have to think how they would charge their cell phones. They didn't have to think about where they would eat. For those 20 minutes, half an hour actually, nothing. No one was asking anything except just sit there and be there, just as you are. Doesn't matter, I wasn't asking for papers, whatever. And we shared in that moment, we were one in that moment. All of these individuals coming together as one in the same home in that 30 minutes. I recently, I'll just try to maybe end with this, and then you can ask questions or something. It was the let's see, 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King in April. And I read something about him that I was a young girl at the time, and I remember that night very well. So I was interested, because I was young, I wasn't so much aware, apart from the usual things we hear about Martin Luther King, about him. And so I read something where they said that the person who wrote this said that he had always talked about sanctuary. And his dream, the famous "I have a dream," right? His dream was that there would be a sanctuary, that our world would be a sanctuary. How do you translate sanctuary?
Well, ich habe es jetzt im Moment mit Heiligtum übersetzt, aber das ist, glaube ich, Sanctuary ist mehr der Ort. Also, wie könnten wir das übersetzen? Es ist der Ort sozusagen, der Ort der Sammlung, der Ort der inneren, ein heiliger Ort im Grunde genommen, ein Sanctuaire.
Right, exactly, sanctuary.
Es ist ein heiliger Ort. Es ist ein heiliger Ort.
Der geheiligste Ort in der Kirche.
Der geheiligste Ort, oui, ein heiliger Ort.
Okay. It's like a haven.
Yes.
It's like a...
Ja, der heilige Ort ist natürlich ein Zufluchtsort.
Ja, wo man sicher ist.
Ja, wo man sicher ist, ja.
And sometimes it's used in a religious term, in a church there's a sanctuary, or there's a place for gathering in a religious sense. But the way that Martin Luther King was using it, it was sacred in the sense that it wouldn't be just in America, a sanctuary where all races could be together. Or it wouldn't even be so that countries could be together. It was from the point of view, like what we talk in Buddhism, of interdependence and interconnection, or Thich Nhat Hanh sometimes calls it interbeing, if you've heard of that thing. It's because we are all one, and the sanctuary is where we experience that. Everyone is accepted as they are. And everything that is usually considered unacceptable outside of the sanctuary is accepted there. Sometimes we say, like, if sometime a church will open its doors to someone who is being persecuted and give them sanctuary. It's protection as well, And so this was Martin Luther King's dream, actually. I hadn't realized that. He talked about how all children could be one and live together. But he saw it much bigger than just the United States of America and a racial issue. He was, of course, a very religious man. And he saw it as the oneness of all being, of all phenomenon, of all beings, plants, animals, all one. And his dream was that that would happen and everyone would be home then in that sanctuary. Everyone would find their home there. As we see, it didn't happen. Or it has not happened yet. But we haven't given up. Have not given up. There, outside here, I read, there was a quote from the Dalai Lama that says, "Never give up." It's true. Never give up. And forget your ideas about what you should do or shouldn't do or can do or cannot do. Start where you are. You're home, there. And look what there is. Look what ingredients you have, the person in front of you. That's making someone at home. That's welcoming them. And that's recognizing that your home is here too. Right here, as you are. That's the Zen art of coming home. It's not complicated. Today, when we were talking with Corinne, Sensei, and Monica at breakfast, Leonard Cohen came up. And I often cite this verse from Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen was a Zen master. Some people don't know that. He lived in a Zen monastery for, I think, 15 years or something. And then when he came out and his manager had robbed him blindly and he had no money left, he decided he had to go on the road. That's what musicians do. They give concerts. And he gave these, for I think 2 or 3 years, he gave these fabulous concerts, which were Dharma talks. I've never heard Dharma talks like that in my life. Absolutely amazing. And in one of his songs, I think it's called, I think the song is called Anthem, but I'm not sure. But the quote that I always give is, he says, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering." So don't get caught up, is this perfect? Is this the right offering? My bells don't ring anymore, I only have this one. Well, ring that one. Forget the perfection idea. Just ring what you have, the bell that you have. And then he goes on to say, there is a crack in everything. Nothing's perfect. And he ends with, that's how the light gets in. If there were no cracks, there would be no light. That's the point of view where, I said the absolute point of view, where there are no differences, everything is the same. There's no light there even. There's no light and dark. There's no love. There's no hate, but there's no love. The cracks are how the light gets in. And if we can appreciate that, then we can be home where we are. We don't have to have another home. We are home here, with me, with you, as you are, where you are. If I had waited for the perfect Zendo, all the translators imaginable, perfect quiet, incense, candle, Buddha statue, all of that, I never would have sat down with those men in that refugee center. I rang the bells I had. It wasn't perfect, but it was. It was. They were home. So was I. Now I would like to hear if you have things to say, questions, or if you would like to comment something. You can ask in German if you're more comfortable, and Corinne Sensei will translate. It's always much more lively when we interact. When it's just not, when it's just me talking, it's kind of boring. So.
Only for you.
What? Only perhaps. Right, that's my point of view. It's true.
I think about, could you help someone to find his or her home, or does each person has to find it by herself or himself?
Very good question. And I could maybe say yes and yes. In the sense that, yes, ultimately everyone has to find their own home. That's true. And, not but and, we can help in the sense of accompany. You know, as a Zen teacher, I accompany people on this path. I can't show them their home. I speak from my experience of finding home and encourage them when they need it. Point to ways that might lead them to their home, but I can't go there for them. That's true. That's a very good question, because we can't, no. We can make someone feel at home, but even the making of feeling at home is not really it, because we can't make anyone feel anything. But we can welcome them, open our heart, and maybe they will experience something. Yeah, good question though. Is that what you meant by the question? Yeah, okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about a process of finding your way home, or finding your home. But what should you be looking for to know that you're arriving there, or you've got there? What kind of feelings, what kind of observations in yourself should you have?
Another very good question. You all have really good questions. So that too, there are different ways of approaching it, because as we say, if you're looking in this direction, you're going away from it, right? That you have to turn around here. And it's true, we don't really know what to look for. We have this sense that there's something we're not satisfied with. Often it's translated in the Buddhist teachings as suffering, but it maybe doesn't present itself as suffering, extreme suffering. It can be just discomfort or uncertainty or doubt of some kind. So we don't really even know what we're looking for. So what I say is sit and just see what arises. And the more you do that, the more things come and go. And it's like an example we often give is a jar of water that is full of dirty dirt. And usually we're going like this, or we're focusing on one thing or another and shaking it up. If we put it down, let it be, which is the equivalent of sitting down, it will settle. And the water becomes clear. And we become more attentive then we become more perceptive to when we become still, we become more aware of things, but also what's here. And we learn to trust. Because when you sit and things come up and you experience just letting go, you then become more familiar with what is true for you. And you don't doubt it in the same way. You gain confidence. Of course, it helps to work with a teacher or to have a regular practice of some kind. Because the regularity is what is really important. Stay with the I don't know what I'm looking for. That's one of your best keys. Because if you know what you're looking for, again, you're going to miss it. Because it's not going to look like what you think.
Well, I'm there. I don't know what I'm looking for.
Good. Great place. Great place to start. Not comfortable always, but great place. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
To me, what comes into my mind is obviously we all have the need to feel at home. And
Yeah.
probably all are looking outside to find our home.
Yep.
On the other hand, knowing it's all already there and it has never been different, why are we doing this? Is there any meaning in it?
Another good question. Very good question. If we're already there, why are we looking somewhere else, right? Yeah. If we are already it, why are we looking to be someone else? True, absolutely. Well, that too is there are different ways of looking at it. My experience is that children, when they're very young, I know for myself, I only realized it much later, but I would have experiences of everything is one, all perfect. I didn't say that in my head, but I did have those moments of absolute just joy with playing a game or being with friends or Christmas or I don't know, having my ice cream, whatever it was. And it was just total. And I think children often have those experiences. It could also be something like, I remember lying on the floor, sun ray coming in and seeing the specks of dust in the sun and being just, suddenly there was some sort of marvel at that. Inexplicable marvel. And I don't remember ever telling anyone that, but if I had, I think that the adults would have just said, oh yeah, that's fine, that's great. Forget it, move on. And we're raised then to not think about those things and to become very identified with me. I am like this, he's like that, I want to be the best in the class. I want to run the fastest. People tell us we're not smart, so I identify with not being smart. People tell me I'm funny, so I identify with being funny, and then I'm stuck on those things. And we grow up and we become stuck on all of this. And our culture around us encourages that. We have to do that. There's an element that is necessary. Children have to separate from their mother. They have to form an identity and become aware of this, because if they don't, then it's psychotic. You can't be in this world. You can't go to the airport and want to get on the plane to Thailand, and they ask you for the passport, and you say, I have no identity. I have no passport. I am one with everyone, They won't let you on the plane, right? So it's necessary in our culture. But then we come back to, okay, but that's only part of the story. And what happens is, as we grow and we function in this world, most of us forget the other aspect of our being, the interconnection, the impermanence, the wholeness. We forget that. And when we are reminded of it, ooh, frightening. Doesn't feel good, sometimes. Sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it's not. And so we do everything we can to forget that. We want to forget that we grow old, that we will die, that we can be sick, that we aren't like the others, that people tell us we're not good, and so we believe that. We want to forget as much as possible those things. And then we end up lost. We don't know who we are anymore. And we don't see the others either. We see only what we want to see, and we want people to confirm what we want to be, and it's impossible. It's like trying to fill up a bottomless pit, because whatever we try will not make it home, and will not make us us. So we go round and round and get lost and try all kinds of things: cosmetic surgery, fast cars, changing husbands and wives, bigger houses, different jobs, forcing our children to be someone who we wanted to be, all kinds of stuff. That's one way of explaining it, of looking at it. But one of the founders of this school, of Zen, who brought the practice from China to Japan in the 13th century, he had that question. Well, if the teachers would always say, our nature is already awake. Like I'm telling you, you're already home. You're already you, who you are. You don't have to be anything else. He heard these teachings, and he asked the same question as you. Well, if that's true, why do we do all this practice stuff? Why do we have to do Zen and rituals and sitting and all of that? And that was his question that motivated him to, actually before that, his mother had died when he was 9 years old. And he experienced impermanence, loss at a very young age. And that figured into his question, well, so why then? Why all of this? Why do we practice if that's going to happen anyway? Or if we're already awake or already home. And that motivated his practice, that question. So it's a good question to sit with. You have a sitting practice because you're wearing a rakusu, so you have taken refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. So yeah, good question. And see, things change. Now it's raining. It wasn't before. And it won't rain forever. It won't rain forever.
Very humble.
What?
We are in Hamburg.
Oh, it could rain forever? Okay. Well, I have a very different experience of Hamburg. It's been 30 degrees and I went swimming today in a lake that was beautiful. So, it all depends, right? It always depends. Can we be home in the rain and in the sun and in the heat and in the lake and in the street? And yeah. Appreciate your life, as the founder of our lineage in America said. Appreciate it all. Everything is important. And it's all your home. Have we talked long enough? I don't know the time. If you have questions, I'm perfectly happy to answer questions. But I don't need to keep going on and on.
So if there are no more, you want to ask something? Okay.
Well, I just want to say that I always forget that I can bring my own bells, or that I should bring my own bells. And I don't know, how does it happen that we or I forget so easily these things? That is so touching when you say this.
Yeah.
Ring the bells you have.
Exactly.
Ring the bells you have.
There's no other bell for you to ring, in fact. Yeah, that's true. And so I heard what you said, and the second sentence when you said, I should.
Yeah, again.
No obligations. No should. that when we use that, then we sometimes we're thinking, oh, I should do this or I should do that. I should have another bell. I should ring it. I shouldn't ring it. This is the right moment. That's not the right moment. Should helps us divide, let's say. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Maybe that's a clue for you. Yeah.